it's easy when we hear the teachings, when we hear the wisdom teachings, we hear about impermanence and interconnectedness and nothing's personal. We're all just arising based on causes and conditions. We hear all the teachings, and it can make such sense when we're hearing it in a place of being calm and still, like we're here in our Sangha. And then we go out into our lives and we kind of think, oh, but it doesn't really apply to this situation, or we just even imagine in some way like, well, if I could just get this one thing fixed in my life, then I can apply all these other teachings. Then I could see how they would work, but it doesn't work for this situation. And so that's where it's helpful to have these questions to ask, like to say, well, this is kind of the struggle that I'm having, and I'm just really having a hard time bringing the teachings in, trying to see how the teachings are applicable in my daily life, because they should be applicable in our daily lives. That's the benefit, right? So I just saw the word benefit from Kathy. So, could I talk about curiosity and its benefits? Yeah, great question. Curiosity, the mindset of curiosity is really a don't know mindset, right? I don't know what that is. What is that? Let me explore it. So when we have that curious mindset and we're looking at something, or we're hearing something, or feeling something, or we're trying to understand something, we're not bringing any preconceived notions to it, which is so much of our challenge with so much, because we bring our expectations, our past experiences, what we think we're going to see. We rarely see the world or hear or touch or taste or smell. We're always imputing what we think we already know on top of it, right? The opposite of curiosity. And so curiosity, really just having that, like, wow, what's that? Let me hear that sound. Wow. What's hearing really like? Right? We take for granted hearing, right? And we think, well, what is hearing? If you had to explain to someone what is hearing, we'd really struggle with it, right? Or even just tasting. What is tasting? What is the taste of chocolate, right? Probably some of you have heard that question before, right? To be able to describe what the taste of something is to someone else, right? Like, so having that curiosity, that kind of openness that we don't have very much of the time. We come and eat our meals expecting what it's going to taste like, and just kind of matching up. Well, is it really tasting like that? Or eating our meal and thinking about the next meal. So not really fully tasting with that sense of curiosity, of openness. And I think we miss so much. Like 99% of it we miss because of a lack of curiosity. A lack of curiosity, a lack of having that mindset of, I don't really know. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of things we don't know. The more we can admit what we don't know, I think the more we pay attention, the more we have that sense of curiosity for our lives, for what's happening, for the wonder and the joy and the miracles that are happening all the time, but that we don't see, because we don't see with that lens of curiosity, with that mind state of curiosity. Even when we bring our attention to the breath in our meditation, and I know I've said this on some meditations, I didn't say it today, but right, having that curiosity is if you're seeing your breath for the very first time, like we take our breath for granted. We take so much for granted, and we just assume, we always have this assumption, oh, I know what that is, I know what that is, I know what that is. Kind of these cursory, superficial knowledge or information. Instead of having that curiosity, well, what is that? Like even looking at a flower, like really looking at it. Past the labels, past I like it, I don't like it. Is it a weed? Is it growing in my garden? Is it growing in someone else's garden? But really just looking and experiencing the colors and the textures and the layers that are in there. And like having that curiosity and seeing all that's in the flower and that interdependence. Right? Thich Nhat Hanh would say, like in the flower, seeing the clouds, right? Because the clouds bring the rain that's in the flower. Seeing the sunshine in the flower, seeing the bee in the flower, right? Seeing, so much like we don't go deeper. We don't have that sense of curiosity so much to see and explore. So I think the benefits of curiosity is that we're present, we're paying attention, we're not seeing through our labels and our judgment and that me-centric, I'm the center of the universe and I know what everything is, right? Instead, we're seeing like, wow, look at that, what's going on over there, right? Just with that sense of openness, of non-attachment. Yeah, I think there's so many benefits to curiosity, to having that we had talked about a few weeks ago, that mind like, I don't know. What is that? Right? Again, people will ask us, what is that? And we'll even just come to some quick assumption instead of even saying like, I don't know. Let's see. Let's explore it. Let's look. Let's see what's going on. We're so busy rushing towards what we think is the exciting moments or think are the exciting moments of life, rushing towards validation or praise or winning or something along those lines. Like we're always so rushing for these things, and not having curiosity for all these little moments, the little mundane moments that are happening, which there's so much joy and peace and tranquility in the simplest of things. When we have that open mind state, that curious mind state, that kind of, I don't know, let's see, I'm moving along here, I'm doing this. Maybe you're just dusting the house, dusting the bookshelves, right? And just kind of, oh, look at the dust kind of fluttering up, and wow, look at the little patterns, like just seeing there. We take so much for granted. We assume we know so much. There's so much we do not know. And I even think with, we've been able to explain so much of the world scientifically, right? There's a lot that science can explain, but there's also a lot that science cannot explain. And there's some mystery and curiosity in that, right? As opposed to saying, well, just science hasn't figured it out yet. Right? Yes, of course, science is going to figure out more things as well too. But let's not inoculate ourselves from the mystery of whatever this life force is that's moving through us, that's connecting us. That when someone says just a Happy New Year, Meredith, and everyone from Char, it's like, what is it that touches when we see, we connect with someone that we know on our Sangha here, and there's kind of this something that touches us here, this sense of connection, and having curiosity about it. Because I think it brings us closer to that sense of awe and wonder, right? That just opens everything up for us. That opens up right? Right? That's right. It's just like Instead of this kind of closed, you think about how we live our lives so much of the time in this kind of narrow looking down. Oh, what are my problems? What's going on over there? They shouldn't be doing that. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that back there. My life sucks, right? We think in this very narrow kind of and very left hemisphere dominant part of our brain, right? Very narrow, very kind of, and very, I've talked about this before, the right hemisphere and the left hemispheres of our brain. And in fact, I'll bring this up again because I'm reading, so this is from Dr. Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and the Emissary. And And he tells this story about the master and the emissary to start with, where there's this thriving small town. And there's this master that kind of runs the town and keeps everything going. But as the town grows, the master realizes that in order to keep the town thriving, he needs to enlist an emissary to go out and do the day-to-day functions, that it would be wiser for him to be able to step back and keep a big picture kind of feel for what's going on, and that if he's not getting involved day-to-day, he would be better served to be able to keep a closer look on the big picture, see how things are connecting and how things are happening and how to move forward. So he enlists this guy as his emissary, and he goes out every day and kind of does the day-to-day logistics of running the town, and he'll report back to the master, this is what's happening, and the master will give him some advice, okay, do this. But then after a while, the emissary starts to think, I'm the one out here doing the work every day. Like, he's just sitting back there, like, what's he doing? Just sitting back thinking about all this and then giving me instructions? Like, I don't need the master anymore. I've got this. So he gets rid of the master, and it's just the emissary running the town that's now gotten much bigger, and it doesn't take long because he doesn't have a handle on the big picture. He's just so kind of caught up in the myopic that the whole town disintegrates and falls into ruin. And what this is meant to represent in this analogy that Dr. McGilchrist is trying to point us to is that the left hemisphere of our brain is like the emissary. It takes care of the little details. It's about manipulating and grasping in the world. It's a good soldier. It's a good soldier, but it's not a good general. And the right hemisphere is the general, the master. The right hemisphere can see how all things are connected and isn't interested in manipulating and grasping, but instead just seeing how all things are interconnected, interrelated. And at the left hemisphere of our brain, not only does it not know what it doesn't know, it doesn't want to know. And the right hemisphere of our brain understands what it doesn't know. Like the right hemisphere understands it needs the left hemisphere. We need both hemispheres of our brain. But the left hemisphere doesn't think it needs the right hemisphere. And so the two hemispheres of our brain are both involved in paying attention, but paying attention in very different ways. The left, very, very narrow, very myopically, thinking I'm just going to take what I need over here. I'm going to do what I want to the earth over here, and I'm not going to think about there's any consequences. In fact, don't even tell me there are any consequences. I don't want to know, because I'm convinced that what I'm doing over here is not having an effect anywhere else. And the right hemisphere would say, but hang on, sure, we need this resource over here, but it is going to have consequences down the road that are going to eventually affect us. And so I think in the left hemisphere, and where I was going with this with Kathy's question, there's not a lot of curiosity in the left hemisphere of our brain. And we have become, this is what Dr. McGilchrist's hypothesis is, that we have become a very left hemisphere dominant culture. I mean, anger, as an example, lateralizes to the left hemisphere of our brain. Being very tribal lateralizes to the left hemisphere of our brain. Very me versus you. Taking very complex, nuanced problems that we take one problem and when we look at everything in a very binary way, it's black and white. And instead of having that curiosity to look and go, well, there's a little nuance here, and there's some nuance over here, and yes, something's right over here, and something's not so right over here, all within this one problem. Like that we don't have this ability to look at problems anymore in this more complex way, right? It's just, oh, you don't believe in that? Well, you're a right-wing conservative, and you must be an idiot. Or you don't believe in that? Well, then you're a liberal, what do they call liberal, and you're just uninformed or something, right? Like we're very quick to cut people off based on their views because we have this very binary view. We want to put everything in a little box. And So curiosity also, yes, coming out of the right hemisphere of our brain, that kind of, I don't know. Ooh, I don't know what's going on there. Looking at it from a much more bigger picture. And the reason it's on my mind right now is I'm reading his latest book, What's the Matter with Things? Another huge book. He writes, it takes him like 10 years to write a book, and it's like 1,500 pages, but excellent book. And you can just see how we are becoming more and more and more left hemisphere dominant. We're less curious. We're less interested in things. We don't look at the bigger picture. We see people as, again, in very this binary way, black and white, and not understanding the implications for seeing others in that way without the curiosity and the openness of just, oh, you have these views on this. Why is that? How did you come to that conclusion? Oh, because this is what I'd heard. And right, we don't talk, we don't communicate anymore. And some of the things, well, meditation and mindfulness, right hemisphere of the brain, right? More dominant. It's not like we're going one side, the other, one side lighting up and the other side isn't. But that there's more activation in the right hemisphere of the brain. Every time we look up, we're activating the right hemisphere, right? When we have a problem, notice how, again, we look down, right? My problems. And the world seems very small and very closed because all we can see is this one little problem, which is usually not happening, often just made up in our minds, or taking a little thread of something and exaggerating it. And we focus and look down, getting more and more kind of into that left hemisphere of just kind of drilling down more and more and more into it. But when we look up, so when you have problems or just any time, look up. You don't even have to be outside. You can just do it inside, looking up. But particularly outside at night when you see the stars, and you get this sense of, oh yeah, I have this little thing over here I've got to do later. And yeah, it's an inconvenience. It's not this big problem I was thinking it was a minute ago. But man, I'm one of 8 billion people on this big rock hurling through space. Like, this is crazy, right? And so it kind of giving you that sense, that big picture again, because whenever we can step back and even see the big picture of things, it's like, yeah, okay, I've got this problem, I've got this bill, and yeah, I'm going to have to work a little bit more to pay it, or something's going to happen. Like, yeah, but it starts to put everything in perspective again. So being in nature, looking up, listening and closing your eyes, and like listening to classical music in particular, like just brings us that right hemisphere, like, right? So so just one or two other little things. I'm going to get to your questions there, T. While the left hemisphere is language, it's the right hemisphere that gets the punchline in the joke. It's the right hemisphere that understands the meaning in the poetry. So again, they're both attending to the same things, but in different ways, which is why we need both hemispheres of the brain. We need both hemispheres, clearly. And all of his research was really done on stroke victims. If someone had a left hemisphere or right hemisphere stroke, that they just kept kind of looking at all of these until they really could drill it down and say, yeah, this is what's going on. Still a hypothesis, by the way, still a hypothesis. But I think it is helpful for us to know this. And I think also just where you were asking in the question, Kathy, about curiosity and just being interested in things, like we're just not as interested anymore. And I think a lot of that also comes out of the right hemisphere, which has been neglected, where we try to, we spend so much time grasping and manipulating the world, and just doing that out of our egos, right? Grasping and manipulating, right? Or just manipulating in our thoughts, like, how am I going to control this situation? How am I going to get that situation? And instead of stepping back and just remembering how all of this is arising, right? How you are arising moment by moment by moment, right? And just getting that sense of the big picture again, but with curiosity, because there is so much we do not know. And that's fascinating, right? How boring to know everything, right? That's what makes so much of this interesting. So great question, Kathy. Thank you. And I think there's just so many benefits to it. Yet children are naturally much more curious and have a much greater sense of imagination. And then we kind of slowly over time, we drill it out of them, right? You got to learn your math, you got to learn your science, and taking too much of that out. We need curiosity, right? We need that. It was. Okay, T, I'm going to get back to your points here now. You're eating chocolate right now. Mouth-watering, salty. So I'm just reading your comments here that you had a clash with an adult daughter over her parenting and yelling, and you were told to, well, you guys can all read it, essentially one of two, yeah. Yeah, and as you thought about it, I thought, why does she not want the help so she can get a break and calm down? So I offered this idea, no response. And I thought, how silly that my kids want to repeat what my siblings did, which was sort of not help each other, and there's so much separation. I think that's, I think I get what you're saying here is that, yeah, people, it is interesting how people, when we're offering help, I will say this, I think when people are stressed out, and again, and stressed and angry, already lateralizing to the left hemisphere of their brain, even offering help in that moment feels like a threat. It just feels like, don't give me one more thing. I cannot take one more thing. And I think it's really important for us to understand that when people are stressed, when people are angry, when people are upset, that they're drowning. And even offering our help, like we have to be really careful the help that we're offering in that moment, because if they're drowning, don't throw them an anvil, right? What they need is a hand. And I think in that situation, to also just be more like, what can I do? Right? They're drowning. Yes, you might have some really healthy advice for them on how to deal better with their children in the future. But in that moment, they're drowning. And for us, because we are practicing, right? We're being more mindful. We're meditators. We're learning the wisdom teachings and how to be more compassionate. And these are the times when our practice, meets the pavement, right? It's like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Someone's yelling right now and they're screaming. And what is the best way that I can handle this situation in a loving and kind way? Every situation a little bit different, depending upon if they're being really aggressive with you or they're just venting or if they're asking and that, help me, right? And you're saying, okay, but no, let's not do that. Let's do this. Just, okay, what do you need? What do you need? Right gift, right time. Right gift, right time. We're so quick to want to say, I know what the solution is, but we've got to remember where the other person is coming from. And if we want to be helpful, to remember where they are coming from in that moment. If they're angry already, if they're stressed already, don't throw them an anvil. Really try your best to see it from their perspective, to acknowledge what they're feeling, to help them feel comforted and safe, because they do not feel that way in that moment. It's again, seeing the bigger picture, right? The left hemisphere wants to get in there and say, no, I know what you need to do differently next time. Deal with what's going on now. Because that's all related. It's all related. Right gift, right time. And sometimes the right gift is just nothing. It's just like, oh, this just isn't the right time for them. It's not going to help them. It's not going to help. It's like the saying, when we speak, our speech should go through 3 doors. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? right? So you can be in that situation, being getting yelled at and thinking, what do I want to do here? What do I want to say? And you might be ready to say something and kind of think, is it true? Okay, maybe it's true. Is it necessary? Well, maybe not in this moment. Is it kind? Maybe not if they're not going to hear it or if they're going to take it the wrong way. Right? This is where our practice is this is where we see if we're getting the teachings or not. It's easy to be peaceful when everything's just going smoothly and you're on your meditation retreat or at the monastery or off on your own and everything's very peaceful, right? Of course, we also can still torment ourselves then, but it's even more difficult when we're around people that are stressed, when we're around people that are making bad choices in their lives. It's much more difficult then. But this is where our practice is. Yeah, it should be practical. It should be helpful to those around us. It should be helpful. It should be useful. So knowing how when we're interacting with others, right? If you find yourself getting angry, if you find yourself grasping at the solution, this is the right thing and they won't listen to me, it's time for us to think, oh, what am I not getting here? And why did I not see that person who was stressed out of their mind? Why didn't I have compassion for them? Because stress means I feel threatened. I feel as though someone's about to harm me, even though you can see nothing's there. But why wouldn't our response be compassion in that moment? We're not understanding how things are arising based on causes and conditions. So it's for us to also go back and go, I need to examine this a little bit more, because my response was, well, they're just being a jerk, or they're so unenlightened, they need to meditate, right? No, no. Our job is not to point out who needs to meditate or who needs to let go, right? It's for us to let go. It's for us to let go. And for us to let go, we need wisdom, right? And compassion. Wisdom and compassion, two sides of the same coin. So I'll just look at a few more of your comments here, T, while I'm chatting away here. But I do just want to go back to JG. So the redwoods, yes, I love the redwoods. So are you up in Northern California or Oregon, I'm guessing? I just want to see, what is it? Yeah, it doesn't say where you're at, but I'm guessing that's where you are. I'm just reading through your comments here, T. I don't know if everyone needs me to read them out or not, but well, I will just say, so originally you were thinking how you would just be annoyed at her. Let's just say at her behavior, not disgusting behavior. Be careful in there, telling a story about it, right? I'm going to add something again there in a minute. But even if I offer non-judgment, it's not wanted. I agree, except she was ramping up while yelling at her son. I was like, I cannot let him think I'm willing. Okay, sorry. Okay, over the top. If you think someone's being harmed, yeah, I would do something too. Okay, I did not know I thought you were the one getting the yelling. Yeah, that's a little bit of that's definitely a trickier situation. I just want to read the last bit. She wants control. Yeah, that's definitely much more challenging because if the child's getting yelled at and you feel like it's becoming like abusively getting yelled at, the right gift at that right time might be for the child to kind of take one and just say like, yeah, at this point I need to think of who's getting the greater harm here. And I do need to speak up just so this child knows that someone is here defending them. And then you can kind of pick up the rest of it with her later. But yeah, I would, if I saw a child getting yelled at, just like if I saw someone kicking their dog or something, I mean, I would say something. I would do something about that. And And the person's not going to be very happy about it. But at that point, my compassion is for someone else. My compassion is there. But then, even so, later on, it's later to deal with the other person once they've calmed down, once they've settled down, and still even having just that. Still, even while, if I were, jumping in between a dog and a person, or a child and a person, a human, anyone jumping in between any situation that I thought I could help in, not hating on the other person, not having ill will towards the other person, because we do not know all of the causes and conditions that led up to that moment. We don't know. And we're so quick to judge. We're so quick to judge of why their behavior was wrong or not appropriate. But 8 billion people on the planet right now, and we can look around all over the planet, and there are people that are losing their minds, having a tantrum in Starbucks right now. Probably 1,000 Starbucks right now, baristas are getting yelled at because someone, just the final straw was them getting their coffee wrong. And everyone's standing around thinking, what a jerk, and filming it. I mean, even more, I just think that's the most god-awful thing in the world, to have someone having their worst moment and then filming it to want to publicly shame them. I mean, people are struggling. People are really struggling. And they don't need our judgment. They need our compassion. And yet that doesn't mean we don't act. It doesn't mean that we don't act. It doesn't mean that if someone were hurting someone and I would have to push them or shove them or something to get them out of the way to protect the child, right? Yeah, then that's what's needed, right? But each situation is different. But I would still caution keeping that sense of compassion in your heart, remembering, wow, this person is freaking out. They are drowning right now. They are drowning. They don't need my judgment. And I'm not going to make the situation any better by judging them. And if the best I can do is just not to judge them, not to make it any worse, but got the child protected, or whoever it was, the adult, whoever it was, took care of them. If the best I can do is just not to judge them, great. See where that leads you. See where that takes you. I'll just go 2. Oh, okay. So yeah. Okay, T, yeah. It sounds like a really tricky situation. And I would suggest if you're not doing it within your own practice, to be doing some compassion practices, because it sounds like you do have some people that are really suffering around you, and maybe doing some Tonglen compassion practice. And I have a couple talks on my teacher page on Tonglen and a meditation. So I would definitely suggest doing some Tonglen compassion practice. It's tough. It's super tough. I mean, speaking of compassion, there was in Tibet, of course, all of the, when China first went into Tibet, they were killing and imprisoning a lot of the monks. And of course, many of you know the Dalai Lama was India, such a beautiful gesture. I don't know actually how many of you know this, but this whole town, Ganj MacLeod, was gifted to the Tibetan people as a refugee place, like just the Indian government saying, come. I've been there a couple times, and you almost think you're in Tibet because there's so many Tibetans, and it's where the Dalai Lama's temple is. And one monk who had been imprisoned in Tibet, imprisoned by the Chinese for a few decades, I think, And eventually, I'm not sure what the circumstances were, he eventually was released. And they were tortured. I mean, they were really, it was brutal what they did to the monks. And so this monk was having an interview with the Dalai Lama after he was released and came to India. And the Dalai Lama asked him, he said, what scared you the most during your time of imprisonment? What was the most terrifying thing for you? And the monk replied, I was afraid that I would lose my compassion for my captors. That's what scared him. That he might lose his compassion for the men that were torturing him. I mean, that's black belt compassion for you. And that's, I think, what we can take away from that is how powerful compassion is. When we can understand, like to just look at it from, anyone that is harming another person is coming from a place of separation. Without a doubt, coming from a place of separation. Not understanding how when they're hurting someone else, they're really hurting themselves as well. Right? That's separation. That's the ego, right? And they're suffering. And even in their bad acts and causing harm to others, if we can look past that and see the human being in there that is the result of all of the causes and conditions of their lives, and still hold compassion for them while still trying to stop what they're doing, still trying to do whatever they can, doing it skillfully, doing it wisely and compassionately to stop the continuation of the behavior. Thinking of like World War II, of trying to stop the Nazis, of hiding Jewish people, of doing what you can do. But still remembering, these are people that are the result of their causes and conditions. The result of their causes and conditions. There was a famous experiment done at Stanford University back in the 70s. And they had set up like a mock prison. And as all studies, they always use the college kids in the studies. And some of the students were, so like you're the prison guards, and then some of the students were designated you're the prisoners, and the prisoners were referred to by their numbers and very dehumanized, and the guards, after, I think they had to stop the experiment like after 4 or 5 days, because the guards kind of were given rules of how they were supposed to treat the prisoners and stuff, which escalated very quickly, and ended up becoming abusive to these other students, and it was just showing like you put someone in the right situation and you give them certain rules, and other people behaving in that way, and how easily we get influenced and how easily things can get out of control very quickly. And when we hear of experiments like that, or experiments where, someone's asked to, keep pressing a buzzer and thinking that they're harming someone on the other side, even though there's really no one there, and they're hearing the horrible sounds and they're like, "You're sure I should keep pressing?" And they're like, "Keep pressing, keep pressing." Only a very small number stop and go, "I'm done with the experiment," right? Many, they're sweating, they feel awful, but they keep doing it. And I do think that shows something about human behavior, that given the right situation, given the right causes and conditions, people can do some pretty awful things, some pretty horrible things. But they weren't always like that. They weren't always like that. It was the way life keeps dealing people blows, and the world today is really troubling. I mean, it's really, we feel very separate. We feel very alone. isolated. We're overly stimulated with technology and material things. We live in a really unnatural society, and overworked, and just stressed out. People are stressed out. And when we see the road rage situations, when we see the person having the meltdown, that was just the final straw. It's something so simple. They were cut off on the freeway, or again, someone just getting their coffee order wrong, or their seat got messed up on the airplane. They are in the wrong seat. Something like, it seems so silly. But it's just like, if you saw all the previous things that led to that, you would go, wow, I have compassion for that person. They are suffering. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to film them. There's not much I can do. They're having a meltdown, and it might be dangerous to get involved in that situation, right? Always use your best judgment, but not to judge people. To see this is our practice, to see everyone is the result of causes and conditions. For everyone here that is a kind and loving and compassionate person, it's because all of the people that were kind and loving and compassionate to you, all of those causes and conditions, we are all the result of all of our causes and conditions. We forget that. We forget too easily when someone is behaving badly. We're so quick to want to judge them. And I'll tell you, and that judging is coming from our ego, not from the heart. And there's no compassion, there's no wisdom. So it's good, it's for our practice, right? To see these situations and to try to have compassion as best we can. And if our response is not compassion, then to know, okay, I need to work on this a little bit more. I need to do some more compassion practices. Because when the heart is open, it's when the wisdom drops in, right? When we see, and then you have that situation where you do see someone having a meltdown. And instead of judging, that response is compassion, and you go, yeah, this is uncomfortable, right? Compassion has a little bit of stress in it, by the way, right? You're meeting suffering. It should have a little bit of stress in it. A little bit of the quivering of the heart. But it's like, yeah, I'm seeing things. I'm seeing things clearly. Go back here. Oh, from JG. Oh, you're not there, but you want to go back. Okay, yeah. It is beautiful, the redwoods. Okay, I think I'm gonna Oh, so you're saying, T, that she did take it down a notch. The problem is how to reach her for her to see I am on her side. Do Tonglen compassion practices. And don't start with her. Maybe kind of work your way up to her. But the more you can do things like that, because, even that kind of, how do I reach her for her to see I'm on her side, right? There's a little bit of forcefulness, a little bit of grasping in that, with a good intention, by the way, with a good intention. So please take that, I hope, the right way. But I think the more that you can come into your heart and really feel that compassion for her. And for those of you that maybe I'll just very briefly discuss Tonglen, it's what I consider to be the heavyweight champion of compassion practices, because it's not just coming, compassion is where loving kindness meets suffering, right? Where we meet pain and we look at it, where we normally don't like to look at painful situations. We will do anything to avoid them because there is a little bit of stress in it. And we don't like how it makes us feel inside. And the worst thing we can do is look away, because then we're practicing indifference. And we do not want to be practicing indifference, right? We want to be able to look at it directly. So compassion is like really bringing us towards pain and suffering to look at it. Tonglen is saying, let me take your suffering on, right? We imagine that we're breathing in, that we imagine the person in our mind's eye, and we imagine we're breathing in. And it's in the form, it's a Tibetan Buddhist practice, in the form of heavy, thick, black smoke. You imagine you're breathing it into your heart center, and then you're transforming it and sending back healing white light. And it's such a beautiful practice. And again, I wouldn't start with her. Start with something, just a friend who's going through a difficult time, maybe someone who's lost their job, or maybe just someone in the news that you've heard, like not something too catastrophic, but start smaller, not so personal, not so emotional. And you can start with someone smaller and then kind of build your way up to your daughter. And as you're doing it, right, taking on their suffering, the wisdom is coming in like, yes, you're starting to see the causes and conditions and why all this is happening. And it's making sense, and you're seeing, like, taking on her suffering, and you see the pain that she's going through, and then sending back that healing white light, and then seeing, like, the relief that person has experienced, the object of your meditation, that it's experiencing this, and realizing, like, yeah, they're a human being just like me. They want to be loved and accepted and included, and they are struggling. They are struggling right now. So yeah, and it's so I think you're seeing it on my teacher's page. So yeah. So that was just very brief. I have two talks on Tonglen on my teacher's page, because we do always want to balance out the wisdom and compassion, because they really are born of each other. True wisdom is born of true compassion. True compassion is born of true wisdom. You cannot have one without the other. If your compassion, if compassion is not based in wisdom, if it's not based in wisdom, then you'll end up being a doormat. And you'll end up getting taken advantage of. And your compassion will be very short-lived. We want to be very careful about that, right? And our wisdom, being grounded in compassion, right? Because the wisdom of seeing all things as interdependent, interconnected, right? And then that wisdom that's coming out of compassion and going, oh my God, as ridiculous as this person's screaming, and even screaming at someone, and you have to act, but it's like they are suffering. I get it. They are suffering. Right? You see it. It's all those compassion practices, all the Dharma talks, right? All the little seeds that we've been planting. This is when it comes and you go, I see it. I see it. Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like you did what you needed to do, T. And so just take the rest of this, to heart, your compassion practices and wisdom practices. Yeah. Not being a doormat. No, I would not say. Maybe you'd written that just before I typed that, sorry, or spoke about that. Our practice is not about being a doormat. If we're not responding, that doesn't mean we're being a doormat. Sometimes the easiest thing in the world is to just zone out from a situation and just be like, oh, I'm just not going to pay attention to this. It's when it's based on compassion and wisdom of not acting, right? That takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of compassion and a lot of wisdom. Nowhere in our practice are we being doormats. Your practice will be if you are, and I've talked about this a lot with kindness practices, if it is not based in wisdom, your kindness practice is going to be very short-lived. And it's the same with your compassion practice. Everything must be. This is why, at least from the perspective of how I teach, it's all grounded in wisdom teachings, wisdom and compassion, right? The same, being grounded in each other. If it's not, it's going to be very short-lived. If our wisdom, it's, if we just walk around and saying like, oh, I see that everything, like we don't really see interdependence or that everything's interconnected or how things are arising, but we just kind of want to pretend without doing the work, without paying attention, without doing, the investigation, the contemplation, and really looking into the nature of reality. But we just walk around and just go, oh, I don't let anything bother me. I just let it all go. But it's not based on wisdom. Eventually something's going to come along and you're not going to be able to let it go. It's got to be rooted in wisdom from the perspective of the path that I'm teaching here, right? There's many paths. There's many, many, many paths. And I do want to make that clear too. There's many paths. This is one path up this mountain. And if it resonates with you, wonderful. Wonderful. I mean, this is the path that's worked for me. That's what I share. I share with you what has worked for me. And it's rooted in wisdom and compassion, and directly experiencing. So your wisdom and compassion also coming through paying attention, looking, curiosity, where Kathy started us off here, right? Having that openness to look for yourself, not with the sunglasses, not with our spiritual sunglasses. Take those off too. Those can become a hindrance. They do become a hindrance after a while, by the way. They do become a hindrance. There is a point where you've got to take those off. And you've just got to look with that open, curious mind state. How is everything arising? But the practices, the compassion practices, vipassana, insight, self-inquiry, all of these practices, they help keep pulling back the veils so that we can really start to see more directly and giving us a foundation so that we can see and experience directly. What did you say? Sorry, Kath. Oh, you thread jumped. I don't think you did. I think we went from Kathy's question to yours. No. No one's jumping over here. It's all right. It's all good questions. And everything you're bringing up, T, and Kathy, I mean, we all benefit from this. We all benefit from this. And we've all been in that situation that you're in, T, maybe not with a daughter and a son and grandchild like that, but we've all had similar situations. Sometimes we acted wisely and compassionately, sometimes we didn't. Or maybe that situation is just awaiting some of us in the next few weeks or a few months. So your experience and in sharing here is helping everyone else, including me. So it's a beautiful thing for us to share these things. It always feels like we're the only ones experiencing this. It's not. We're all experiencing difficult situations. And while we may not all be having the exact same situation you're having right now, we can all still take something from this, especially in the world where again, there's so many people that are just losing their stuff. And I mentioned maybe it was on our live event on Sunday about just the instance with the dog last week at the taco stand here. And all of a sudden how tense it got. And I mean, it did die down pretty quickly, right? And you could see everyone like looking at this, just two dogs interacting, and then the owners like right up in each other's face. And, there was tenseness there, right? And it's like, ooh, okay, a little tense. You got to see, is there something to do here? I mean, I think I told you I had my dog, my puppy dog, my young dog, and I just had to try and keep her out of it because she's still learning. And then it's over, right? And it's like, okay, no judgment for either person. They are reacting based on all of their causes and conditions. We don't know we don't know what they're dealing with. We don't know, but, and again, when you're not judging them, right? And having compassion again, because I did know, I'm like, I know both of them are still carrying it around. I'm sure that evening they were telling everyone about it, lying in bed that night, thinking about it, how they would say something differently. And next time I would do this, right? And just compassion, because I've been there too. And it's awful to not be able to let something go, to keep feeling like you were so threatened, right? And so compassion. So it may not be the exact same situation, but we all have similar situations. And it is good for us to all remember, we can act. We can act. I mean, this is a path, the Buddhist path is definitely a path of not causing harm. But that doesn't mean that we're not protecting someone. And if I've got to beat someone off to protect someone else who's getting beaten, like, that is a good response. That's a wise response. That's a skillful response. Yeah, and practice self-forgiveness there. We all sometimes do it, T. We all sometimes speak out and go, oh. But again, that was the condition that was arising. What could you do? Those were the conditions that were arising, right? Apologize, of course. Always apologize. But also forgive yourself, right? If we just carry it around, then that judgment then on ourselves because we acted in a way that wasn't as kind, right? It's like, forgive yourself. You're human. You are human too, right? If we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive other people. If we can't forgive ourselves, we can't forgive other people. So there's so many places, so many ways in which our practice guides us in these situations and helps us navigate life, whether we've acted skillfully, wisely, compassionately, or we didn't, right? Because this practice isn't about saying you have to be perfect, right? Even once you say, oh, I feel so much compassion in my heart, but still something stupid kind of comes out of our mouths, or we do something like, okay, you're human, right? We make mistakes, right? And sometimes we're just a little tired, and sometimes we say the wrong thing, right? Just not even a harmful thing, but just like, oh, that wasn't so smart, or maybe I was wrong about that. We find out later or something, right? I am quite sure things come out of this mouth sometimes that aren't 100% accurate. I mean, I do my best to try and make sure they are. But I mean, of course, right? We're human. So forgiving ourselves as well. And you can just notice that sense of letting go, because if we're beating ourselves up, it's our ego beating us up. So we're lost in the ego still. And that is just going to perpetuate more mindless behavior. But the moment you forgive yourself, oh, sweetheart, right? Self-compassion. Oh, sweetheart, that was tough. It's okay. You're human. You're allowed to make mistakes. It's okay, right? The moment we do that, right, you can just feel that letting go. And the letting go of forgiving yourself, right? Then you can also think like, oh, maybe I could stop judging them too. Maybe I can forgive them because they're human too. Everything, everyone, every person, everything on this planet, universe, is arising based on causes and conditions. If we screw up, right, and we didn't harm anyone, I mean, even if we screwed up and we harmed someone, like, apologize. I'm not saying that there isn't something that may not need to be cleaned up afterwards. But we all do it. We all do it. And it's just those were the conditions that were arising. If you have a few days that go by and not one silly thing comes out of your mouth, you don't trip once, you don't do anything wrong, it's like, have gratitude for those conditions. It wasn't you. It wasn't you that made that happen. It was the conditions, right? It was your Dharma, all the meditations previously, all the Dharma talks you've listened to, or the books you've read, all of that, all those conditions all arising together. And have gratitude. wow, that was nice. It's nice to have that experience, but it's not going to last. Don't get attached to it. It's not going to last, right? We're not trying to be perfect. No one's perfect. No one's perfect. Imagine if we were perfect, how obnoxious we would be, right? I think a lot of compassion comes out of recognizing I'm not perfect. So when someone else makes a mistake, it's like, oh, I can relate to that. Yeah. Oh, my heart goes out to them. I know how that feels. Maybe their cell phone goes off in a meditation class and you're like, oh, I've been there. That's been me too. I know that. Instead of judging them, thinking like, oh, can I send you some compassion right now? I know how you're feeling, right? So it connects us. It connects us. I was going to go to Rosa here. So I think saying your nephew was judging you, but you didn't react at the time. But later you were like, I should have said this or I should have said that. Yeah. When we're getting into the I should have, we're in our ego. We're in our ego. You reacted however you were going to. It doesn't mean that we can't reflect. So I do want to make that distinction between reflecting and regretting or rewriting what happened. There can be a healthy reflection of, okay, maybe I actually should have said something when they were judging me, but in a kind or in a compassionate way, right? Because again, it's not about being doormats, right? But not in a, if we were able to say something that wasn't snide or just kind of stood our ground a little bit, someone's judging us and maybe whatever way that they're judging us, take a pause, take a breath. Always good advice. Just take a breath. And you can say, well, I get that you feel that way, but I don't appreciate it. And so I think I'm going to leave at this point. Maybe we'll talk again later. Right? I don't know if it's coming to some kind of tipping point there or something. But it is, people will judge us. People will judge us. But we don't have to judge them. Because if it just comes down to it, if you don't like being judged, don't judge other people. That doesn't mean in the moment that someone's saying something to you. If someone were saying, I'm trying to think of an example, like someone was saying to me like, oh, Meredith, I think you're, you don't socialize enough. You don't come out with us enough or something, because that is a criticism I'll get. And feeling judged maybe by that. Your lifestyle's really isolating you or something, like maybe they'll say like, we don't think this is healthy for you, right? I've gotten that. Because they want me to come out and party and I think I don't want to go do that. And I could just say in that situation, pause, take a breath. I'm not harming anyone by my lifestyle, and this is what makes me happy. I'm not judging you for your lifestyle. And it's really nice if you wouldn't judge me. I would appreciate if you didn't judge me for this. And in that way, kind of pointing it out a little bit, right? But not in a pushing back, but not in a doormat, but also not in a throwing the doormat at them. Like there's some equilibrium in there. There's a middle ground where we can speak. But I will tell you this, don't ever rehearse that. Because you don't know how the situation's going to be, what someone's going to say if they're judging you. Don't rehearse it, but just breathe. I'm not harming you by my lifestyle. I'm not harming you, and I'm not judging you for your lifestyle. So, I hope that helps. Oh, and you're saying now you don't. Great, Rosa. I'm glad to hear that. Oh, good. And Diane's saying the same thing. Yeah. People will judge, and judging another person really says more. Like if we're judging someone, it's really saying more about our mind state. right? We're lost in our ego. We're feeling that sense of separation. Whenever you feel a sense of separation, it's easy to judge because you don't see the harm of it. But judging another person, whatever thought you're having, whatever unkind thought, judging them, ill will, anger towards them, right? That is harmful. It's harmful to you, and it eventually comes out in some, passive aggressive way. So it says more about us. So to notice that in ourselves when we're judging others. Oh, pause, come back, breathe, come back into the present moment. Oof. Okay, little old habit playing out there. Not beating myself up for it. Just an old habit playing out. Okay, I'm back. Okay. Right? Let it go. Let it go. You're human. Right? But when others judge us, same thing. Oof. We want to push back. Again, if the situation, usually they don't really say something to us too much. It's very rare that someone actually says they're judging thought to us. Even if we kind of pick up on it in their kind of little ways, we usually don't have to respond to something like that. But I think it's just more important for us to focus on not judging others. But we have all judged. So again, let's not throw stones because we have all done it as well. And your causes and conditions, being a spiritual practitioner, being a meditator, practicing mindfulness, practicing compassion, coming on Dharma talks, spending your free time on a Dharma talk, is giving you the conditions to judge less and to eventually not judge at all. But those aren't everyone's conditions, right? And so without that, they're still judging. Most people judge. But we don't have to judge because we don't like it. We don't like being judged, so don't judge other people. And if they're judging us, okay, fine. You don't like it, I won't judge them because I don't like it. So, and it does not feel good to judge other people. It does not feel good at all. You have zero compassion when you are judging for another person. Your heart is completely closed when you are judging another person because you are coming from a place of separation. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it was Rosa that mentioned that because that's just a good to remember that on the judge. Yeah, it was Rosa. Thanks. And Diane, thanks for all your, both of you, being in your own company. Yeah, I love being on my own. And you know what, whereas I have gotten some criticism, I have gotten a lot of criticism for it in the past. Not often directly, I'll just hear about it. Someone will say, oh, they were commenting how you never go out. And I think, well, if I didn't like being on my own, I wouldn't have this inclination for this path. Because I would be out socializing all the time otherwise. And it's kind of hard to do both. It is very hard to do both. If you're always socializing, always wanting to be with other people, you don't get enough time to be able to pause and to be quiet and to see how your mind is playing out and to see how things are arising and changing and how you are arising in each moment. We do need that time to be alone. And we don't necessarily have to go off to a monastery or go live in a cave, but there is something symbolic that we can take from that. That there does need to be a certain amount of aloneness time to slow things down, to be able to see what's happening. Otherwise, you're just getting caught up in it. You're just getting kind of pushed along the sea of what everyone's doing. And we're trying to break out of that wave of what most people are doing, of living from the ego. We're trying to break out of that. And to break out of that, you do have to step away, right? It doesn't have to be, completely, it doesn't have to be coming down to Mexico and living here on your own. It doesn't have to be, it can just be however that looks in your life. Whether you can have a few hours a day alone, if you can have a weekend alone, a couple of days a week alone, right? I cannot tell you what that does for our practice, right? To see our own minds. Even, and of course, if you can go on retreats are great, but even just in your own home, where you don't have the structure is nice as well, to be able to just be, to see what's going on, to pay attention, to have that curiosity with what's going on. When you feel that little pull inside of you, that need for something, some kind of stimulation or something, right? And that curiosity to come in and feel it, and experience it, be interested. What's going on in there? Wow, this little mind movement getting pulled out into something. Because maybe it wasn't you didn't want to be with other people, but there was still, you were looking for something, right? Maybe just because that mind movement, we're just looking for it. Oh, wow. And you breathe and you feel it. And again, that curiosity, that openness to it. Wow, what is that? Wow, it really feels like there was something here that was missing something a moment ago. But now that I come into it and I investigate it and I really look at it and I move closer, I can feel it moving away. And in fact, now I feel that sense of completeness and wholeness that I thought I was needing to move towards. Because in fact, the separation is only coming from the thought, only comes from the thought. There's no separation without, and not any thought, thoughts about me, even thoughts about what my neighbor's doing and why I don't like that. That's still a thought about me. If it's an ego-related thought, if it's a judging thought, if it's a comparing thought, if it's a chasing happiness thought, if it's a pushing back on something, right? All of those thoughts is that's related to me, subject and object. The moment we have a I don't like, I do like, I want, I don't want, subject, object, we have split ourselves into two, and we believe the object out there is going to bring us back together, when in fact it was the thought that split us into two. The only reason we feel, or the main reason we feel so good when we get to somewhere, we split ourselves into two and say, I've got to get there, I've got to get there. There's this idea that I'm going to be so happy when I get there. What feels so good, there might be some nice conditions so that feel good, some pleasantness, but what really feels so good is the absence of the thought, I've got to get somewhere. We never notice that. It wasn't so much the object as the absence of the thought. And so when we notice that, coming back in, when we have enough time and space in our day, when we're alone more, we can notice it and come back in and feel it and still move towards maybe lunch or something, right? A nice meal that you're having. It's like, okay, that'll be nice when I get there. It's not going to complete me. In fact, if anything, the wanting of it is separating me. So coming back. So having space and time in our day, scheduling less. If you have those conditions where you can schedule less, schedule less. It is really hard to do this if you are running from one thing to the next. It is. I'm not saying impossible. But if what you want is to wake up from the illusion of separateness, the illusion of I'm not enough, I'm incomplete, of worrying about what everyone thinks about me, of what I think about me, of being worried that someone's going to do something that's going to upset me, that I need everyone in the world to conform to my views and opinions and what I want. If we want to wake up from that, having more space and time in our day is definitely one of the conditions that will help you. For sure, it will help you. So with that, maybe we should bring our time here together to an end. We have been going an hour and 45 minutes. So we should, time to bring us to an end. So we have, so first of all, thank you to all of the great questions and comments. And thank you all for making this, for making our Sangha, right? For being here and sharing and being vulnerable and trusting. I so appreciate you trusting these questions and and for all the love and support that each of you shows. So thank you, and blessings to every single one of you. Thank you so much for making this what it is. Thank you.